6:32 p.m. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for your time and service in advance. Our first agenda item, do we need to do a roll call? Or is this?
It's a call to order. And then
So I called it to order. Okay.
So you're good, yeah.
Sorry. A little rusty. Summer. Okay. So the first item on our agenda is to consider the minutes from July. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay. Motion by trustee Bachhorst, seconded by, let's see, I'm going to give that, I think Commissioner Kylie Miller was first. You'll have to be faster, Josh, next time. Any discussion on those minutes? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the minutes as presented, say aye or show of hands.
Aye.
Dan, we'll wait for Dan to come back. He's left the room. Oh, Commissioner Klein has joined us. Welcome.
I think you're frozen because I'm here. There we go.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Commissioner Klein, we are just approving the minutes for item 2. And we have a motion and a second. There has been no discussion. Do you have any discussion related to the minutes?
I do not.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye or show of hands.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we look like that's unanimous. Motion carries. The next item is reconsideration of the June minutes, and the reason this is on the in your packet, we have those minutes, and they were as amended based on discussion and agreement at the July meeting. Afterwards, there was I included the email thread from Nathan Baer, Attorney Baer, around the clarifying whether there was a misquote or whether we were just changing. Ultimately, where Attorney Baer landed was that the way that we amended the meeting, it doesn't change the minutes substantively, and it was agreed upon by the person who spoke. However, I wanted to give the option of reconsidering because I took all that feedback to heart, and I don't want to proceed in any manner that is not, compliant. So we do not have to, so legally we don't have to reconsider the minutes. If the body would like to reconsider the minutes, now would be a time to motion to do so.
Before we do that, can I just do a really quick clarification?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. I don't want to belabor the point, and I don't want to spend any more time on this than we have to. It's just that at the beginning of that meeting, there were some connectivity issues with the internet. And what I thought I heard somebody saying was, well, somebody quoted me in the minutes as referring to the master plan as the Bible of the village. And I didn't actually say that. So let's reflect what I actually said instead. And that's totally fine. The minutes themselves don't actually have to be that detailed to record what every person said on every topic. It's just to reflect what the formal actions that the body took. However, my point was, if you do get that detailed and you just make that policy decision to do it, my advice is not to amend the minutes out of a sense of decorum if the minutes originally and accurately reflected what somebody said. If somebody drops inappropriate word or phrase and the minutes reflect that that's what's said, it's true, and you'll leave it there and you move on. I didn't realize that until later in the meeting when somebody asked a follow-up question and I went, did I hear that correctly? I thought somebody was saying I was misquoted and we're changing it, but now the question led me to believe maybe it was because somebody thought it was inappropriate and we were changing it for another reason. So if it was the latter, let's just leave it alone. But as a practical matter, again, you don't need that level of detail anyway. And the new amended minutes still accurately generally depict, just not in a verbatim way, what was conveyed, and it's such a minor point. It doesn't have anything to do with the action that the body took. So I was just, my only point was for the future moving forward, it's like the slap on the wrist from the kindergarten teacher saying, don't do it again, right? So, if that pops up again in the future and somebody says, well, I don't like the way that sounds, maybe for decorum's sake, we should change it from Bible to is an important document, I would say don't do it. And that was my only point.
Mhm.
So that would be all.
Commissioner Kylie Miller?
Hi. Having edited more than 150 educational books for kids, I understand how fun it is to change people's words. But I honestly was pretty shocked how much time and energy went into this. I don't think there's any reason to change it back. And I would just say, going forward, if you have a question, I would refer you to dictionary.com. You can put in Bible, lowercase, uppercase, you're going to get the same result. And then scroll down to definition number 4, and you'll find the usage that I used with a similar example. But I don't think there's any reason we all agreed on the change, no reason to go back and change it again. So that's all.
Well, I appreciate, I didn't want to act out of turn, and I appreciate the responsiveness and the collaboration around this. At this time, if there's anybody that does want to make a motion to reconsider the minutes, this would be the time to do so. If there is no such motion made, or there is a failure due to a lack of a second, we will move on to the next agenda item. So is there a motion to reconsider?
Well, I may hand up. I just have a question or clarification to what Nate was saying, though. We're all on the same page that it said Bible, and we're getting rid of it saying Bible because we don't want it to say, or some people don't want it to say Bible, correct?
That was my request.
Right. Okay. So when you're describing these things, it's not that that I think Barbara did not use the word Bible, the swear word Bible, but she did say it, but now we don't want it to say, or in general we voted to change that, which again doesn't matter. But I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think because the amended wording still actually describes what happened. It just doesn't use a verbatim quote. But I would just say in the future, if somebody does use a verbatim quote in the minutes, just don't edit those out of a sense of decorum. That would be my only suggestion. Is because again, if they accurately reflected it to begin with, I think then you can start going down a slippery slope of amending it's like the gateway change, right? What else does it lead to? Right?
Like in the future, I don't like Eric using my name, right? Because he's so grumpy when he says it. I got it.
Well, I'll leave that to the two of you. But I think in this case, Attorney Bear's point is that since the amendment was agreed upon by the person who spoke, that there's no need and they're compliant with procedure and requirements. So yeah, just again, to be clear.
I apologize because again, my internet was going in and out, and I totally misinterpreted what was happening. Otherwise, I would have said something sooner, and we've already spent more time. There's 5 minutes of all of our lives we'll never get back, and going down the rabbit hole there. But again, it's just one of those deals where, just looking down the road, moving forward, just keep that in mind. It's really not a big deal at all.
Okay. All right. Do I have consensus to move on to the next item then? All right. I'm taking silence as a yes. Okay. Moving on to item 4, the RFP for form-based code.
Yep,
Director Byer?
Sure. Yep. I can provide a brief overview. There was a memo in your packet that just generally explained why we're here to review this. The comprehensive plan was recently adopted. This was the #1 next step in terms of looking at our zoning code. And so in order to do the level of detail that we would like in our zoning code, form-based code has been recommended within the comprehensive plan. That would require the use of a consultant because we do not have the time and expertise on hand to get the type of product that we're looking for. So as a next step, I have drafted a request for proposals that we're looking for recommendation from the Plan Commission tonight on with respect to having the village board approve the issuance of it. We would issue it out, and then subject to the responses received, we could potentially enter into a contract with a consultant to do so. So I have a brief presentation here. It's pretty much just exactly what's in your packet. Let me share my screen. Oh, I'm rusty on this. Share screen. Okay, so hopefully you're all seeing the cover page here. So form-based code. The RFP, the content, the first section is the proposal requested, why we're here asking for it, a project background that includes a community description, the redevelopment history and opportunities in the village, as well as our future land use map, which was just adopted within the comprehensive plan to provide some context for the consultants bidding on the project. The timeline would look towards a village board consideration of the RFP on September 20th. If we do get to that point, the RFP would be issued the next day. The timeline currently within the plan or within the RFP has proposals due October 22nd, at which point then we would review and interview firms for recommendation by the Plan Commission November 23rd and village board approval of the contract December 6th. That's probably never an ideal time to start a contract, but that gives us a month to kind of clean things up and hopefully commence early next year with this project that is, in my opinion, projected to take a months to complete. So we're looking at this fall, kind of getting all of our ducks in a row so that we can do this in the late winter, early spring of next year. The project scope, there are 5 tasks outlined, and I should be clear that I've taken the scope from a recommended RFP for form-based code from the Form-Based Code Institute. Task 1 that they recommend all communities do is to do an initial review, analysis, and project introduction. That does provide the consultant enough time to give some background analysis on both previous efforts and the community in itself, at which point then they would introduce the project to the Plan Commission, the things that they found, their recommended next steps, things like that, get some feedback directly from both the Plan Commission and the public at that meeting. Task 2, the consultant would then entertain a public design process. Within the RFP, we've identified at least 2 public design workshops or full planning charrettes. That doesn't mean that we can't do more. But we're just saying at a minimum, we need to do 2. Based on the results of those 2, at that point, then we could possibly contract the consultant to do additional meetings if we felt necessary. But it's my recommendation that we include at least 2 of those within the task 2 in the RFP. Task 3 then, based on that public design process, those meetings, the consultant would draft the form-based code. They would then in task 4, bring that back to the Plan Commission for a presentation of the first draft, at which point both the Plan Commission and the public would have a chance to review and provide comment on that. Then they would come back with a second draft of the Plan Commission, at which point we would hope it would be ready for recommendation. Now, like I mentioned before, if this takes more meetings or takes more time, so be it. We can always add that to it. This is just the minimum recommendation of what we're asking for. And then task 5 would be the approval process, which starts with a recommendation by the Plan Commission, so yourselves, and then adoption by the village board through a public hearing. So as you know, any zoning change in chapter 535 does require that the public hearing be held in front of the Plan Commission or in front of the village board for adoption. So that's the general content and scope of the RFP. And then the kind of back end of that is the village's standard RFP language. So if you have any thoughts on that, I'd be happy to hear that as well. But for all of our RFPs. So that's a general overview of what we're looking at here. I'd be happy to take any questions or provide any further clarifications on where we're at, but hopefully we can get this up and running this fall so that we can do it in late winter, early.
Thank you, Bart. Barbara, do you have a question? I think, Barbara, you're on mute. And I did.
Don't you have the public comment first before we?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to take public comment first, but if you have a burning clarification question about the No? Okay. So are there any members of the public that would like to be heard on this item tonight? Mr. Walsh, you're not muted. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, you bet. I would just like to add one possible thing. I've been a part of a lot of those design charrettes, and my personal experience has been that the village staff has been a part of those. Now, none of those people are currently working in the village. I would just ask that those design charrettes be videotaped so that there's some record of what the actual community response was, and that we find some way to make sure there's lots more community activity and community response in these meetings, because the ones that I've been to have been very sparsely attended on the front planning end, and then everybody's very unhappy later on. So if we could figure out a way to get more people involved who actually have an opinion later, I think it would be better for everybody, and then there'd be a record of that. I think that'd be a really good thing. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree. We did receive, there's an email record in the materials with a similar suggestion. I will say, I think the Plan Commission is aware of this, but the village last year, we did do a lot more village-wide mailings, hoping that would elicit more participation in similar kinds of invitations around the comprehensive plan, et cetera. And that didn't actually happen. So if there are specific ideas, we do always have a communications plan with these projects. So if there are specific ideas, I think emailing them would be great, and I'm sure that we can capture them and then see what's within our capacity.
Right.
And certainly, I know Commissioner Miller, you've been really good about posting on Facebook to try to elicit participation and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
What
could ask the
mixed
consultant,
results?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I should, if you could ask the consultant for some ideas. I mean, I somehow, this is I think it's really important that people understand the implications, because you're trying to do something here, which I applaud. I think it's fantastic. I think form-based zoning is a fantastic idea for the village. And look how many people are here. Like, nobody. And people don't care because they don't realize what the implications are of these changes and of what these policy issues are. So the consultant should have some ideas on how to elicit public comment, how to get people to be interested, knowing that it's going to affect the village for the next 20 or 30 years. Thank you.
I have an idea. I think we should pay the contract based on how many residents they get to come to meetings. How about that? Is there kind of a formula, like a commission per head or something? Okay, I'm getting silly. I'd like to open it up. Oh, any other public comments? Nope. All right, I'd like to open it up for Plan Commission deliberation and or discussion for recommendation. Barbara Kiley Miller.
Sure, I'll start. As far as getting more people involved, Bart, you might want to check when the deadlines are for Shorewood today, and have like a series of articles, maybe just to a general overview, educating people what form-based planning is to start, and then as we go along and there's more specific information with meeting dates and that kind of thing. Let's use that since it goes to every home, and even if people don't sit down and read it, they'll flip through it when it first comes in the mail. I agree that from everything that I've read, the most important thing we do is to work to ensure that there's enough public input. And it kind of reminded me of that long public process for Wilson Drive. that was kind of led by the public, whereas here we're going to work with a consultant. So maybe more like the parking and transportation study. I did read yesterday, Bart had 48-page guide for communities on form-based codes. I will admit it put me to sleep a couple times, but it was it enlightened me. It was very interesting. And there were a couple of things both in our kind of charge to the consultant and in there that I made notes of. First, as far as who the stakeholders are that we're going to gather together, I think we need to put the emphasis on residents and small business owners, especially those who are either on or adjacent to Oakland and Capitol, because of the spillover effect it's going to have on those neighborhoods. I questioned the inclusion of developers because if what we're trying to find is what are the community expectations and to gather a community consensus, I wasn't quite sure how they fit in that puzzle. I agree with the resident who spoke just a moment ago that I don't think 2 like workshop things are sufficient. However many we have, I think we need to vary the times, just like the parking and transportation study did, so that we have, depending on people's work or childcare schedule, that they have an opportunity to participate. According to that guide, the most important thing, or one of the most important things, was the kickoff meeting. And it sounded like that takes place maybe after the consultant does like their initial survey and has photos. So if we envision like how the parking study and the Wilson Drive thing work, you could have, some introductory talks, letting residents know what that's all about, what this code change is all about, and then have some examples on board so they can, tell you what they think. Because apparently some of the things we're supposed to decide are, what elements of our built up commercial district do we want to preserve? What do we want to preserve and enhance? What do we want to evolve? And what do we want to transform? So sometimes it's easier to have like a concrete example in front of you to say like, yeah, I like that, or I don't like this. And we've had like, I don't know if it's 10 or a dozen years of development. And I think no matter what we do, we should, have some introspection to think, okay, what worked really well? What should we have done differently? What unexpected problems or benefits develop because of the changes we've had? And I think all that's important to build that community consensus that we want, because we don't want people to come back and be unhappy afterwards. I did have some questions for Bart. Under task number 3, drafting the form-based code. And some of the things I highlighted were need to implement principles of functional and vital urbanism and practical management of growth. And I wasn't sure what that meant, vital urbanism. And then like in paragraph 3 in that section, it said fundamental urban elements to ensure that all buildings complement neighboring structures on the street. So does that mean including the residences that are butting up or adjacent to those commercial areas?
Yeah, yes to the second point. I'm not finding where you're in task 3, Barbara.
Yeah, it's just under A where it talks about vital urbanism. I wasn't sure what that meant. It's like the second last sentence in that paragraph.
I think it means vital as in vitality. And I know that's in currently within the Shorewood 2025 plan is that we seek to be a vibrant community. And so I think vitality is used in a similar sense there. If you have an issue with it, I'd be happy to look at it or remove it. Like I mentioned, the task section was largely based on the template from the Form-Based Code Institute. And
Yeah.
so if we have issues with that, I'd be happy to look at a better way to explain that. But my understanding of that would be to reference a vibrant community. So I could change that to vibrancy or
No,
something of that nature.
Yeah, it was just the urbanism. I wasn't sure if, like, in the planning world, if that's referring to one specific kind of look or model or, you know, that kind of thing. But
Isn't it a land use reference?
Yeah, in general, urban would relate to a human scaled built environment as opposed to a suburban one, which is more auto oriented. And so, you know, for thousands of years, we built cities in an urban form that allowed us to, you know, walk places and live our lives as we need to. So that's what it relates to when it references urbanism. And so it's just a reference to city development as opposed to auto-centric suburban or exurban development.
okay, thank you. And on page 35 of our packet, this is under the proposal content. Number 2 is the approach, where we're asking the people, you know, who are going to respond to the RFP to identify your expected public engagement efforts. And I wondered if we shouldn't be giving them our expectations for public engagement up front to save their time and make sure the product that they come up with is what we want, rather than, you know, have them to have to revisit it if we're disappointed. So that's something to think about. This might be with the stakeholders. I'm wondering how we incorporate with this effort the village's, you know, recent efforts on historical preservation. The bike and pet safety has recommendations, I think, from that master plan they did a few years back. I think the Conservation Committee has presented recommendations for buildings. So I think there needs to be some thought how to incorporate those work products in as well. And let me just see here, in that guide for communities that you gave us, there was a page talking about, you know, organizing the data and details and what they called, in quotes, ground truthing the findings. You know, so we've got maps and diagrams and photo galleries that are created by the consulting team. And then stakeholders should be asked which areas are successful, which need improvement, and which are good models to replicate here. And I thought perhaps that's something, again, that we do at this kickoff meeting or the first open house to, you know, people may not have, they may not have a real clear idea of what this code, this form-based code is, but they kind of know what they like when they see it or what they don't like or what's worked well for them. So I thought that was important. And there was also another section, we're kind of past this, there was a section about parking towards the back, and we might all want to read that, you know, when we've got time to see how, you know, with the changes what we may be making to that zoning code, how parking might work into this new code-based, form-based code. Anyway, I think that's about it. Those are the only things that came to mind immediately as we're presenting what we want from the consultants who are going to apply, and how we want to engage the public, because I think that's the most important thing. Don't we all agree? That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to say I read the that guide as well. I really appreciate that you always sort of provide those reference materials, and I was like, wow, we've already done a lot of this kind of stuff, and so maybe our contract won't cost that much because maybe we're closer than we think. So that's a good thing. At least a girl can dream. Any other comments or discussion from the commissioners? Regarding the RFP, making a recommendation. All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to recommend the RFP as presented with the accompanying feedback and suggestions for engagement. Okay, was that?
if we're gonna make a motion with the accompanying feedback, I'd just like to ask a couple questions of Barbara, if that's okay.
Mhm.
So Barbara, I agree with like 90% of what you said, which is, I guess, probably typical. But the other 10%, I was just wondering, you said, we might want to, you were confused by the inclusion of developers in this.
Yeah.
And I think from some of the public comment that makes sense too, because, especially recently, we've had a lot of public comment around why it seems like we or the village or anyone is leaning towards developers and catering towards developers. But if I remember when we went down this process, and Bart, you can correct me if I'm wrong, part of creating this phone, when we talked about this process was to make it easier for developers to understand where we're going and not have them present stuff that doesn't make sense, let them know that this is our expectations. But I think we need, and not probably people who are developing current projects involved in the process, but people with that background, because part of this is they're our customer as well, right? And we're trying to let them know we do want development here, but we want it to be this way. But if we go and say, hey, every ash tree we cut down is going to have to be the siding of a building, the developer is the one that's going to say, hey, that's not going to work. We're never going to do the siding of a building out of an ash tree, just to give you an example. None of us are necessarily experts on that. I think it's important that we have the people who are trying to eventually reach out to and let know what we'd like to see for develop. Let us know, hey, this is realistic. This is not realistic. 1 floor of underground parking is great. 8 floors doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? I think it's important that we involve what I think some people would call the other side of this, because we have a lot of people that don't want development. We have a lot of people that do want development. People want it a certain way. Other people don't. I think we have to involve all parties in this. Otherwise, we're making a mistake.
I hear what you're saying, Dan. And I disagree that we either do or don't want development. I think we just all want.
Commissioner,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, since we don't have to, we're just taking a recommendation tonight. So I think what we're looking for is everyone's viewpoint who would like to make a point tonight, that it move forward. We don't have to.
Got it. Dan, if you haven't read it, in the conclusion of that study, there is a section on will it be accepted by developers. So I would just suggest taking a look at that.
No, I read it, and I'm again. So I just slightly disagree. So that's why I just wanted to make that comment, and I can make a motion.
Mhm. Okay. Are you making the recommended motion that was in the? Do we have a motion in the packet?
Yep.
Okay.
Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say. So, so I move to recommend Village Board consideration of the request for proposals for consulting services related to form-based code update of the village commercial and mixed-use zoning districts.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I heard a second. Was that Commissioner Kudo?
It was Therese as well, so let's give it to Therese.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric.
Commissioner Klein with the second. All right. Nice teamwork, everybody. Any further comments? I will say it was interesting, the email that we received suggesting that we do education as part of this. I'm intrigued by what that would look like. And I don't know whether it would be the consultants part of their job or what, but I will just note that I do think education, if we can add that into the process in some way, would be positive. Because certainly, sort of the look back that Commissioner Kylie Miller was recommending, that what worked, what didn't work. I think looking at things just based on what they look like and sort of that type of subjective look can be a little misleading, just because not all developments are, not all sites are the same, not all parcels are the same, they have different challenges. And we do have a lot of older buildings that are not conducive to contemporary life, even from an environmental standpoint. So those types of things of looking at the benefits of change, I think would be helpful for people to understand as well. All right, if nothing, if no other discussion at this time, let's do a roll call on the recommendation on the floor.
Dan Wicklund,
Aye.
Josh Pollock,
Aye.
Therese Klein,
Aye.
Barbara Kiley Miller,
Aye.
Eric Kudo,
Aye.
Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
President McKeag.
Aye. All right. Moving on, I believe it's item 5. Discussion of possible recommendation of modifications to front yard and street side yard patio requirements as detailed in 535-9F, section 2. So, yeah, you want to give us an overview?
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview of why this is coming to the Plan Commission. So I know at least one Plan Commissioner was here, I believe in 2015, when the Plan Commission looked at these regulations and designed specific requirements for front yard and street side yard patios. This opening slide here is probably an example of the level of plan detail and screening and things that we were hopeful to get. And so this is oftentimes what we do get. These are 3 examples of what were shared back in 2015 that Commissioner Kiley Miller reminded me of. So all of these at the time did have front yard patios with various levels of screening. The code at the time was written to require natural vegetation as screening. And so with that, you kind of get all kind of responses to that from the very detailed plans that I shared previously. And then in this case, we had one house come to us earlier this spring that actually installed a patio, what we as staff determined to be a patio, along with a driveway project that they did. And so it's not the greatest of pictures, but you can see here in the back here, they have a sidewalk leading up to it, and then it expands both directions towards the sidewalk and towards the house into a larger area that we determined to be a patio that could technically qualify for, tables and chairs, regardless of how they were using it. And so we sent them a notice saying that you're required to have natural vegetation as screening. And they in turn provided us with a plan, a hand-drawn plan, which is acceptable. We can find ways to work with this. But their screening proposed was peonies. The design review board is in charge of reviewing and approving all patio screening plans. They, in their interpretation, did not believe that peonies provided adequate screening because the peonies are not there until later in the spring and go away in the winter. And so their interpretation had always been that natural vegetation meant that it would be some sort of year-round screening with some sort of height or some sort of quality that was there to provide that screen year-round. This applicant challenged that opinion to our Board of Appeals, at which point the Board of Appeals agreed with the applicant by saying that what's currently in the code is not detailed enough to require the screening that the Design Review Board was asking for. And so with that, the Design Review Board asked me as staff, and they did provide me with this direction to seek an amendment to the code. The first section here previous applicant, she did not take that to Board of Appeals because her time on that had expired, but just cutting that off for the future, we just want to define what a patio is. It's not a side. It needs to be an unenclosed, at-grade, hard surface outdoor area with minimum dimensions of greater than 6 feet in length and width and an area of 64 square feet or greater. We technically believe that is what we're looking for. So anything less than 6 feet, we would determine to be a sidewalk. And so it needs to be feet in both directions. And the 64 square feet relates to the minimum size that we take building permits in for, I believe, storage sheds. So that's where both those dimensions come from. In item 2A2, the Design Review Board would like to remove the word adjacent or directly from adjacent, because in the past they've had examples where applicants want to keep a row of landscaping or some sort of drainage in between the house and the patio. And so they believe adjacent is a more appropriate word than directly adjacent, because it gives them that leeway to allow for that sort of in between area. And then the most important part that they're looking for the Plan Commission's recommendation on to allow it for Village Board consideration would be that final section. All materials must be of high quality, such as cut stone, lantern or bluestone, or decorative concrete. In addition, the patio surface shall be screened from public view by year-round continuous natural vegetation of at least 18 inches in height, such as shrubs, ornamental grasses, or perennial plants that provide screening through the winter months. High quality decorative masonry or concrete walls and permanent planters no higher than 3 feet may be used in combination with natural vegetation to achieve year-round screening. And so we did have 2 meetings to discuss this, and the design review board does now have a landscape architect on its membership, and so we're happy to have her around. And so this was the language that they have come up with that they would like the Plan Commission to review for consideration. And I'd be happy to keep this up or remove it, whatever is easiest for the facilitation of the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Bart. I'd like to take public comment on this item at this time. Are there members of the public who would like to be heard on this item? Mr. Walsh, you're the only member of the public left, I believe. Would you like to be heard?
No, amazingly, I don't have an opinion on this.
Okay. You're like sitting in the front row. At this time, then I'll open it up to Plan Commission deliberation and discussion. Commissioner Wickland.
I have a motion.
All right, lay it on me.
First of all, before my motion, Bart, nice job and thanks for the example because it actually made it make sense with the example. Otherwise, I would have been lost. So thanks. I move to recommend village board consideration of modifications to front and side street yard pattern requirements detailed in 5359F2 as suggested by the design review board and contained within the staff report.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Wickland, seconded by Commissioner Kudo. I believe Commissioner Kylie Miller has her hand up.
Yeah, of course, you know, I had to get out my editing pen. It kind of amazed me. We had 5 or 6 meetings about patios and porches and decks, which are not allowed in the front yard. But it took us a while to figure out the difference. So just a couple of things in that first paragraph A, I would replace unenclosed because I think that might be a little ambiguous and just say uncovered. Because what we learned is the difference between a porch and a patio is that a porch has a roof over it and a patio does not. So I think that might be a little clearer because enclosed could mean a railing around it or a little, 3-foot wall or something. So I think uncovered is clearer. I don't think we need to say at grade because again, from the examples that those 3 photographs that Bart showed us, some people will have their patio, like say at stoop level. Where you have to walk up a few steps and then you've got your front door with the patio off to the side. So I think we should delete at grade. I wasn't sure about that 6 foot in length and width. If that would limit the number of people, who could find room for a patio. But Bart, if you think that's, not too onerous, we can leave that. And as you can see from those examples that Bart showed us, that directly adjacent is what we were kind of working towards, something that's an extension of the house, just like a front porch would be. I understand the point about, wanting to have that little space in between, as long as we don't end up with a patio, in the middle of the yard. I think there are 2 of the houses at the intersection of Capitol and Lake Drive, those on the west side of that intersection, do have patios in the front yard. Those were put in before we changed the code, I believe. And so those kind of things, I'm sure, were, got a variance to put a patio in that location. So I mean, I'm partial to leaving to say directly adjacent, but I would be open to whatever the rest of you think. I think if we can edit that 4th paragraph, we're saying year-round continuous vegetation. So I don't think we need to say that provides screening throughout the winter months because year-round is pretty understandable. And rather than 18 inches in height, I would switch that to a minimum of 12. Because often when you buy, say it's a boxwood or some other kind of shrubbery, you're going to get a smaller plant that will then grow to, be taller and wider and will fill in. But just for the sake of affordability, I think, we don't want to make this too difficult for property owners. That just saying 12 inches, I think, would be sufficient. And the other thing is number 5, where we say patios may not exceed 6 inches above grade. I can see if you're just putting in a flat concrete patio or some kind of stone where the grass is. But again, in those examples that we were looking at, some of those patios are up higher, more at door level. So I think that that's going to, you know, throw a lot of current existing patios out of compliance. So I don't really think we need to have number 5 in there. And the last thing is in that paragraph 4, we're talking about concrete walls and permanent planters no higher than 3 feet. I think we should insert 3 feet higher than the patio surface, because otherwise it's going to be like a recent, you know, Board of Appeals meeting where they were talking about a fence. It's like, which side are you measuring on? You know, and so to avoid any ambiguity, I would just say no higher than 3 feet than the patio surface. And I think those are my only edits. What do you guys think?
I'd be happy to briefly respond if I'm allowed, or how would you like to?
Yes, you can respond, but then I'm going to need you to just highlight, because I'm not comfortable just saying, yes, I was following you, but I kind of need to, I didn't know where this was going.
Barbara's
So-
a no on my motion, clearly.
No. I just don't want us to have to revisit this, you know, because somebody else didn't, you know, doesn't understand what we want or what we need.
Yeah, I'm happy to make it as clear as possible, because that's the reason we're here, is because I had 3 meetings this summer to revisit this. So I'm happy to get these questions at least discussed or answered before the board actually does take it up. I have no issues with changing unenclosed to uncovered. I find those to be generally interchangeable. So I'm fine with that change. I'll let the Plan Commission determine if they are as well. The at grade, so the at grade in A and the 6 inches in 2A5, I can see them being somewhat incongruent, right? So we allow them to be 6 inches in 5, but at grade in A. I would not actually recommend that we go higher than 6 inches. So I would be fine removing at grade, acknowledging that in 5, we do have that limitation of 6 inches above the grade. That I do understand to be intentional. And so those existing patios that are out there are fine. But the intention was that these not be elevated. I think they're intended to be at ground level with screening, so they're not, you know, above your neighboring property. And so I think that was an intentional 6-inch requirement in number 5. And so I think my at grade inclusion in 2A is unnecessary. And so once again, I'm fine with it changing to uncovered and removing at grade in that first section. With respect to directly adjacent, I actually did specifically provide this plan as a reference. And so as you can see here, their proposed patio is here. It is not directly adjacent to the house. The house is a window well and landscaping and a sidewalk. But the design review board, in their opinion, in their minds, has really liked plans like this. And so they struggle with how they can look at this, review this, and say no to it when they think this is the intention of what the village would like to allow. So I did specifically include this one. If the Plan Commission disagrees and would prefer that the patio be directly up against the house and this landscaping be removed, you know, I guess here would be the time to discuss it, but they think including adjacent gives them the leeway to approve something like this that will allow screening on all sides essentially in a nice area in between. So I would still advocate for the removal of the word directly, but once again, I'll let you guys go back to discuss that. Going the wrong way. I think there were a couple more things. The 18 inches, the 12 inches.
Yeah.
I have no issues with that. I guess that, like I said, that was provided to us by a landscape architect, so I wasn't challenging her on that. I would be fine going back and asking her if she has an issue with the 12 inches before it goes to the board. And so I'd be fine if she, as the landscape architect, thinks that's doable with the plantings that she's familiar with, but she did provide that 18-inch recommendation. And then I do agree with you. Thank you for the comment of no higher than 3 feet from the surface, because as you mentioned, we did have a Board of Appeals meeting where we heavily debated where to measure that from. So I would be fine with that. And then the last one that you had was provide screening through the winter months. I agree with you. If it says year round, that's already included. So I have no issues with that being removed if the Plan Commission agrees.
Thanks, Barb.
So yeah, just to summarize, it would be, I'm fine with changing unenclosed to uncovered. I'm fine with removing at grade. I would advocate keeping the removal of directly adjacent. I'd be fine with either 12 or 18 inches, but I would prefer to ask for the advice of the design review board on that because we have a landscape architect, like I mentioned. I'm fine removing the through the winter months because I do agree that it's duplicative. And then the no higher than 3 feet from this patio surface, I think is a good clarification.
Okay. I will say thank you for all those suggestions and thank you for running through them. And I would like to keep it 18 inches. And I agree with the other, I think keeping the directly or removing the directly, whatever it was around adjacency, it makes sense to me. Other comments from the Plan Commission, either on these suggestions or your own?
Yeah,
Commissioner.
I agree with what Bart said, and you know, specifically removing the word directly, I think is important, and I think 18 inches is an appropriate screening height. 12 inches, you certainly don't cover much. But again, if the landscape architect thinks that's okay, I'm open to that too. The other are more grammatical, so I'm fine with those.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollack, Trustee Bachhorst, Commissioner Kudo.
I'm good.
Okay. Trustee Bachhorst.
Thank you. I'm fine with, I want to keep in the, I'm fine with what Bart said. I would also keep in the 18 inches. He can speak with the landscape architect and whatnot. But I think I'm ready to vote on it. How about this? I could say that I would be fine voting on it as is, as the original motion said. But if, you know, it's the will of the commission to make a couple of minor edits, you know, that's fine with me. This still goes to full board. So, you know, we can always change it back there. So, I hate to do that. That's more work than we need to do. This went through what DRB as well several times. There's been a lot of work in this. I appreciate everyone's work and comments and feedback. But, you know, these are committees and volunteers just like this one that, you know, that I'm very appreciative of. So I would say, you know, again, some of the minor changes fine, but the things that Bart was steadfast on, keep in. He's our planning director. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Pollack, since I haven't heard from you, not to single you out, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'm ready to vote. I'm happy to approve as is, or we can do it with changes, but I think this is fine either way.
Do you have an opinion 12 inches versus 18 inches?
I am ambivalent between the two of them.
Okay. Mr. Wicklund, I think you would need to take a friendly amendment on.
What, I'm just wondering, I have one question before friendly amendment. I love friendly amendments, but the unenclosed, as you know, Bart, do we not, and like Barbara said, I know we sat and listened about patios and all this junk forever, but we don't have covered patios?
No, that's a porch.
Correct. I believe that's the primary. So I'd have to look at the definition, this is perhaps a good thing. I will clear this up before it goes to the board, but yeah, if it has a roof over it, it's a porch. The unenclosed, I believe, relates to the sides. So
if it has a roof over it, it's not attached to the main structure. It's not a porch.
It's not a porch then.
If what?
If it has like your thing, and I know Barbara was also wanted the adjacent part, which probably goes to her thing, but if it's not directly adjacent and it's not attached to the structure, it is not a porch. It's correct. A covered patio. So I thought unenclosed was actually probably why the design review board came up with this. That probably encompassed the correct definition.
Yeah, I believe unenclosed actually I got from a standard definition of patio that I researched in the zoning, best practices guide. So the patio did come unenclosed. I'd be happy to make sure that this is the proper word. I did review it with Inspector Burris and the Design Review Board as unenclosed. And so I'm happy to make sure that the proper word is in there. If unenclosed is correct, we can keep it, but uncovered relate to an attached porch, correct?
Correct. So we do have some cover, we do have the potential for a covered patio.
I think a covered patio might be a pavilion. So yeah, a pavilion doesn't have sides. A pergola has sides. We reviewed all of these things. And so, like I said, it's not as, yeah. And I hate doing this on the fly like this. Like I said, we did come with unenclosed. So perhaps I should be more firm on that being researched appropriately, but I'd be happy to make sure unenclosed versus uncovered, the proper one is used. But it is very technical when it gets to these details, which is why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would say in that case that we should not amend anything to change that. If upon study you find something different, you can bring that to the village board, I think at that time. But since there were so many meetings on this.
I had one more thing, if that's okay. And
Yes.
Barbara, I don't disagree with your winter months thing and being repetitive, but maybe, are you okay with leaving it in? Because the problem, it seems like Bart encountered on this one example he gave is it's like people always, like why, and those are there, they're not. And I think the idea of adding winter months is like a peonies, for instance, may be great screening. They consider year round, but it doesn't meet the rest of the qualifications in winter months. So it's just, I get it repetitive, but it's almost repetitive to kind of hit it home with people. Like, this is why we're doing it, or is that just not appropriate?
No, I think you're perfectly right that some people will feign ignorance that they don't know what year round means. And so maybe, Bart, you want to just write it as, by year, screen from public view by year round, including winter months or something. So it, just flows nicely. But yeah, so you really have to spell it out for some people. And I think our whole goal is to prevent people being turned down by the Design Review Board or having to go to the Board of Appeals. So we can be as clear as possible. I think that's our goal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I think there is, well, I don't know if there's consensus to leave it at 18 inches since that was presented to us and there's a landscape architect on the Design Review Board. I just want to provide enough guidance and I also want to know what I'm supporting. So the motion on the floor is to approve it as is and recommend to the village board for approval and adoption. I think if we're going to make these changes, we should be clear about which ones are going to be made and that should be amended into the motion, at least in a catchphrase like with amendments agreed by the body. Yes, Bart?
Yeah, at this point, I think the only two things I'm down to is I still agree with in 2A to remove the word at grade, because like I said, it's covered in section 5 already. And
Okay.
then the measurement requirement of saying no higher than 3 feet from the patio surface, just to clarify where we do measure, because as Barbara pointed out, we did have a lengthy Board of Appeals with that. So those are the two amendments that I believe are still under discussion that I heard at least some consensus on.
Okay, and I did not hear any disagreement with those two, so perhaps the cleaner way to do this is a friendly amendment to approve as presented with those two changes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend that we will approve the changes except for the removal of at grade in 2A and the insertion in 2.4 of from the patio surface following no higher than 3 feet, to read no higher than 3 feet from the patio surface.
Bart, is that what your understanding was?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by trustee Bachhorst. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's take a roll call vote.
Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
Barbara Kiley Miller,
Yes.
Josh Pollock,
Yes.
President McKeag,
Yes.
Eric Kudo,
Yes.
Therese Klein,
Yes.
Dan Wickland.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Item 6, future agenda items. Are there any?
Can I just clarify?
Yes.
Was that just a motion to amend the motion on the floor? Do we still need to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
So now we need to vote on the amended motion. Any discussion on the amended motion? All right, roll call vote on the amended motion as presented. Please.
Sure. Josh Pollock,
Yes.
Barbara Kiley Miller,
Aye.
Dan Wickland. President McKeag,
Yes.
Eric Kudo,
Yes.
Therese Klein,
Yes.
Trustee Bachhorst.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, future agenda items. Does anyone have a future agenda item? All right, seeing and hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by trustee Bachhorst, seconded by Dan Wickland. All those in favor? Show of hands.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Then we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Night.